but let's get on to some Framelits, some thin dies, and talk about those. Now, when it comes to working with thin dies, we've really stepped up a lot of different things when it comes to the amount of detail that we're going, and that to me is the fascination of Framelits. The fact that I can cut such detailed shapes, and some of the detailed ones are like the new doilies. The doily is really cool because you can still cut it out of cardstock and papers. This thin one, this is done out of the new tissue wrap. This is the new tissue wrap from Ideology. It's just plain tissue that you can stamp on, collage on, but it also holds up really well to make paper doilies. We also use it kind of as a release for our thin dies instead of wax paper, so it doesn't affect the way you can ink. And this is just sold, it's on a 6-inch roll, just in a box that has a blade on the box. So what's nice about this from a stamping aspect, I know it's not a stamping demo, but you need to know. Stamp on it with a permanent ink, and when you apply the distress collage medium, this paper becomes translucent. So you can run this through a printer, you can type on it, you can stamp on it, any ink will dry on it, and then it becomes translucent when it gets wet, and it doesn't dissolve the way white tissue paper will, because it's made out of a washing. Really cool. All right, so when it comes to working with thin dies, I always say it's really simple to kind of understand what mediums you can cut. Thick dies, cut thick things. Thin dies, cut thin things. So this is really designed for paper. You can do some fabrics or some thin felts or thin foam, but really when we start getting into detail, we need to figure out what we're going to use to actually cut this design. So because these have so much detail, it is really smart to invest in the precision base plate. Now this base plate, all this is a metal cutting pad. So this guy replaces one of these. Remember when I was going through and running my sandwich, the sandwich always consisted of 2 cutting pads. So this guy only replaces your bottom cutting pad, so I can get that out of the way. That's my sandwich right there. Now Sizzix will tell you not to use this with your magnetic platform. Moving on. So I have this on my magnetic platform. Right, your die's gonna go right on. I've done it last year. I've done it since last year. I'm sorry. But you've been told not to. But I'm gonna do it. So what I like about this really, and I think maybe it exerts too much pressure, I'm not sure, but I've not had any problems with it. So I can't really change the way I do things that quick. So let's talk about one of the new dies. This is a very cool die. It's called Gearhead. And Gearhead, let me just dump it out here just so you can see. There are a ton of gears in this pack. All of these little gears, big, small, otherwise even super tiny, all of these are in one package, and this entire pack of dies retail for $19.99. This is when you're talking about thin dies. Thin dies, when we're pricing these are based on the amount of metal we start with. Okay? Doesn't matter whether that piece of metal is going to be one design or 20 or 30 pieces. It doesn't really matter. So this guy, I was really able to kind of nest them together to fill up that whole sheet of metal to get so many. And I also created this little border. And these are great because I can take these and I can cut through just some different cardstock. So I'm going to take these dies are going to go face down. So I've got my magnetic platform, precision base plate. These are going to go right onto my paper. Just go die side down. And what's cool is if you're going to do a card, you can still position these to create kind of your own gear as long as these don't overlap. Remember that, never overlap your dies, which is why I created this. Because I felt the need to I wanted some to interlock, so I still made one, and I'll show you how this looks. But just remember, if you are going to use multiples, don't overlap your dies. That would be bad. Okay? Unless you want to use them as embellishments, because that's what they'll be. That's exactly what they'll be when you're done. All right, so we got that. I'm just gonna put my top cutting pad on there, and we're gonna run this through. All right, so once this comes out, some of those dies, thanks, guys. Okay, so this is gonna cut these awesome little gears with so much detail in them. Die pick. All of these little shapes, very cool. I love this one. So really cool way that you can create all those die cuts. And because they're thin, we could still put that on another layer. you know, if I wanted that thicker than that cardstock, I could have put that on another layer of cardstock and still cut through with that. So let's talk about this little border gun.
I guess they layer with the
What's that? They do, yeah. So you can actually nest, and then work your way up in scale to the bigger one. So let's cut this one, this guy. So this one's very interesting because this is really a framed piece. This is not, you'll see what I mean when I go and cut it out on the card. Because sometimes people expect those corner dies to remain intact, and it's really just a design preference, honestly. I just didn't want that. I really wanted just a corner piece that I could put on whatever I wanted. So this particular corner die, when I'm using it, it cuts out the whole thing. So a lot of times you have corner dies, it leaves that corner connected. That is not what this die does. This, I wanted the entire piece, and I could go in and clean it out and pick it out. And there's my little brush. I'll clean some of this out. The reason I wanted to do this, so I'm just using the die brush. Remember, the die brush could also be used for cutouts. So the reason I wanted to do this is because I wanted the ability to create this layer that I could either adhere on a card or use it on like one of the ideology vignette boxes to glue on there. And I found that I would always be trimming it out 90% of the time. So I thought, you know what, if you want it on a card, you could just glue that onto a card or sandwich it into a layer of a card. So that's why I have that cut out. So all of those are in one set. Corner, the gears, all of that. All right, moving right along. This is why Rochelle loves it when I demo, because there it stays. I'll clean up before she comes back. I'm not, I will. I learned my lesson. She's like, quit leaving this place a mess. So the next one that I really love, these are the new wildflowers. There is a whole set of wildflowers, and I can take all of them out. There's maybe 7 flowers in there. All, yeah, they're really, really cool and really detailed. Our project from CHA, this is what we did. We created kind of a mixed media silhouette with that, just using those. They're amazing when you see them. When you cut these guys out, these are incredibly, incredibly detailed. So keep in mind, that's gonna happen. It's okay, relax, you'll be all right. One of the things that I suggest though when you're cutting those is try not to go straight in, okay? A lot of times when you go straight in with dies through the roller, think of it as like curling a piece of ribbon. It tends to do that. If you angle your die slightly, it helps distribute the amount of pressure and it doesn't curl it as bad. Okay, it's just something to consider. So I'm not sure how she used this because we prepped that entire class and did not curl a single die. So maybe it was just moved in straight. Well, maybe it just went in straight. I mean, it's still gonna cut, but you know, a lot of people will freak out because their die kind of goes in that little, you know, banana curve. What's great about this particular die is we really push the boundaries of what these thin dies are capable of doing. I know I have my die here. Because when I first designed this, I knew what I wanted. I wanted it to look like dried flowers. I wanted that little pressed flower look. And the specs of these thin dies require a much larger gap in between the blades. So they said, you know, we have to change this. And I said, if you have to change it, then forget it. Let's just do something else because it won't look like a flower, it'll look like a tree. And they went back and said, well, we'll try it just to see if it cuts. And that's the amount of detail you get. In that little tiny gap, that's amazing to be able to cut side to side those linear lines and really create that kind of dried floral, pressed floral look that you can use. So it's beautiful. And all of them, you can see with all of the petals, everything that's in there, just amazing detail in this. So probably one of my most used thinlits so far. Just use it again and again. Use it to even create a great negative. You can use it as a stencil, create this, put pattern paper underneath it, do all sorts of things. So it's cool, it's really good. Now if you're using thin dies ever and you want to keep that paper in its matrix, it's always good to put a piece of wax paper between the die and what you're cutting, or you can use a piece of tissue wrap, and that will keep the paper in its structure. So for example, in the class project, we wanted to sand the edge of that paper. So by doing a layer of wax paper in between, we run it through, my cut piece remains intact in my base, allowing me to sand it and then pop it out. Because you can't sand it right now. And you can try, but unless you're gonna do an emery board, you know, you're not gonna get out the sandpaper, yeah, and go for it.